Well, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, man.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise.
So today we are exploring something that was emerging at the end of last year, which is, as you were saying, I guess in a linear way, that wasn't that long ago, but in a New Year kind of way, seems like a long time ago,
It's a world away.
in the long, long ago. So today we're going to explore the question on Totally Classic, is LinkedIn sexist?
Hmm.
I, Andy Swindler,
And I, Brendan McNamara.
will look at this question as we always do. And we like to pose a binary question to a potentially very complex topic. And sometimes it takes more than one episode to unravel all of the threads that come out of that. What our typical format is we vote up front. We have a rigorous discussion, and part of that is being an example of how such a discussion can happen, especially when we disagree, rooted in
Hmm.
love and curiosity.
Absolutely. My, I have to, I wish I could have I feel like I've done this for the last couple of questions, which is not ideal. Although who knows, maybe in just a neutrality sense, it is ideal, but it's not the strongest position to begin from. But sadly, my vote is a thumb directly across, waiting yay or nay to kill the gladiator in the arena, because I just simply don't remotely know enough. And I have tried or endeavored strongly over the past, especially 5, 6 years. If I don't know, I try to go ahead and say I don't know. And once I've done enough thinking, research, like pushing on something, then I'll very strongly, at the very least, start somewhere strong. But I don't know. And as I was saying to you prior to our taping, until maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, I had no idea that LinkedIn was anything other than a job posting board. I had no idea until you had started sending me links of people's like putting their thought pieces on there and that sort of thing. That it functions much like a social media site as well as being a job search, job posting board.
Yeah, and I've been on LinkedIn as long as I can remember. In fact, back in, I don't know exactly when it came out, but 2007, 2008, I had an agency, a digital agency, and we were teaching people how to use LinkedIn, how to get
Yeah.
more reach, more traction. I just passed 8,000 connections, followers. Um, so that seems like a lot of people to collect.
It is
And
a lot of, yeah. I mean, for networking purposes, that sounds very rational. I actually like the language they use on there of connections.
yeah,
You got some better, that's a
yeah,
better
and they do actually
way to
distinguish it.
phrase.
I
Yeah.
probably have more followers because you can just follow people, but there's a mutuality there, which is nice
Oh,
because you
interesting.
to
Yeah.
connect means they had to accept the connection, which
Yeah.
I am extraordinarily liberal about. But yeah, it's funny how it can get overwhelming, and as I am
I
actually
bet.
taking my own time and being more discerning about that, I'm having to say no to people, with not necessarily to connect, but if they follow up and say, "Hey, can we get a call?" And be like,
Yeah.
I'm taking fewer random calls these days, which is good.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, it's funny. It feels like a step or two above spam. It's like filtered spam to be like, okay, well, you know somebody, well, I know somebody, and maybe we can. And I think in the modern maelstrom of our present day economy, I can understand the increased humanity of that, of connecting with individuals makes a lot of sense. And also, I think there is a undercurrent of fear and tension too. That's just like, who knows? I don't know. The next person you meet could make a thing happen, and then I'm not desperate anymore, which is hard to take on. Even just interacting with, you know what I mean? You tend, as an empathetic person or an empath in your case, that you can, that can be a burden beyond the 30 minutes of virtual chit chat.
Ah, well, thank you for being so empathetic. Maybe that's one of the reasons I struggle to say no.
Sure.
I just also genuinely, as I hope we demonstrate on the show, a genuine curiosity means you can always have a good conversation. You can always learn something.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
that
Yeah,
doesn't
you'll
mean
get,
it's like the most valuable thing I should be doing right now with my time.
yeah, value optimization is a very difficult thing for the curious mind. What brought this to your attention in the first place in terms of, I mean, I know, but for the listeners, uh, what flagged this, having been on it for 15, 16, almost 20, creeping up on 20 years in a few years? Um, was this
Yeah.
is this a recurrent phenomenon, or is this kind of a more recent examination of a potential hyper-masculinization of the platform?
It certainly flared up. I think I started noticing it in November of 2025, a couple
Mm,
months ago.
okay.
There were a couple of women, I believe especially, posting about this and posting and started posting experiments.
Yeah.
And as I've been looking a little deeper into it, some of them are running experiments where they would post the identical content to a couple of male colleagues. It'd be like two women and two men. And I assume, they controlled everything else, same time of day, everything best they could.
Sure.
And they saw in those limited experiments, based on what I heard, they saw dramatically more reach, that would be the term, on the male colleagues. And one of the things that really caught my attention was actually some of these women really base their livelihood and their business on LinkedIn.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it's interesting for me because I really do use it like a social network. And that's, to me,
Yeah.
that's mostly what it's been for
Yeah.
all these years. And last year I was really active on LinkedIn. And for what I know of the algorithm, it's kind of like, hey, if you post once a week, you'll stay a bit elevated. And it's I'm kind of a funny test potentially, because if it's really scanning things like what I look like and what pronouns I chose and stuff like that, like I'm obviously male. Um, but if you look at my content, it's a lot of more like spiritual. Literally my headline right now is, you know, human connection entrepreneur building technology that reminds us how to love, right? So one of the terms that's come out is bro coding. And
Mm.
so there's the sort of just there's a few different levels, right? There's changing your parameters, let's say, the like
Mm.
hard parameters, like pronouns, I think is the clearest thing that would indicate gender in LinkedIn. And there is a whole demographics section, but
Oh, okay.
it's kind of handled separately than your profile. And so
Yeah.
it's unclear. Like, in fact, it probably has a disclaimer that says, this is just for demographic information and won't affect anything.
Sure.
And by the way, that is LinkedIn's official stance, is that the
Okay.
algorithm wasn't designed to do this. By the way, I think
Right.
I think I forgot to vote. So I'm going to vote initially yes.
Okay.
Uh, I guess glibly just because I just believe bias exists in everything we build. And
Yeah.
LinkedIn was built by tech bros in Silicon Valley. So it's kind of like hard to imagine that it didn't get some tech bro-ness in it. But let's also, as we often do, and as you guide us
Yeah.
to do in a lot of detail, usually define what is sexist before we go any further.
Yeah. Well, the adjective, let's just do Cambridge. I don't love Cambridge as a dictionary, but um, I think they do a good job. I feel like they're almost more of a somewhere between colloquial and formal in terms of their capturing of definitions, but I just liked how they phrased it here. So, according to Cambridge Dictionary, it is sexist as an adjective. I think it's also used as a noun in modern parlance, but as an adjective, suggesting that the members of one sex are less able, intelligent, etc., than the members of the other sex, or referring to that sex's bodies, behaviors, or feelings in a negative way.
Okay, well, so that's more overt than maybe we're talking about here.
Sure. Well, yeah, yeah. Well, this is one of the things. I mean, sex. I mean, this gets us almost immediately to sort of like, oh, what parlance are we talking about? Are we talking in the sort of like neo, whatever, woke naughty list sense of where words like sexist, racist don't necessarily have the same meaning that they carried historically? Now, the problem is they still carry the weight and they're drafting in on that which it meant historically. I don't like this one just because it is like the definition of genocide, where it's like the intentional destruction in whole or in part of a people, cultural, ethnic group. You're just like, in part. I mean, if so, then every war, every battle, uh, every suicide bombing is an attempted genocide. So that seems like a terrible definition. And this one similarly. So if you refer to members of one's sex, their body's behavior or feelings in a negative way, I guess they mean in a generalized sense, meaning like women's. But you know what? I think that's weird because that doesn't that seem to almost pathologize discussing entire gender sets bodies behaviors or feelings in a negative way, like it actually, and why just negative? Anyway, so I think that's actually a pretty sloppy definition by Cambridge. It probably reflects why I don't like them. They're just wildly imprecise. It's more like colloquial. So this is like the examples of sexist comments, or she described her boss as a old-fashioned sexist pig. I would say sexist people are those who just either predominantly or maybe even exclusively refer to, let's say, men or women's bodies, misogynists or misandrists, either and both, their bodies, behavior, or feelings in a negative way as a sort of consistent pattern. Meaning, there's nothing wrong with codifying men or women or talking about men naked. Their penises flop around like little fleshy, limp mushrooms, and they look weird. They look weird. Like it's kind of gross and weird. So that is a sexist comment according to Cambridge Dictionary. But it's also just like, I don't know, just evaluative of a subjective, and one can even almost prove it as much as one can prove beauty in an objective fashion, that there's something a little like about it. And you're like, and some, you can even say that the disproportionate hip to waist ratio could be unsettling for some, and you could speak about that in a negative way, and it doesn't have to be sexist. So to me, there has to be a consistent. I think if I was to ever accept this, but I think an individual joke could be. So, but here we're defining a platform, which is kind of like defining a person or like an entire like organization, as opposed to, are there sexist comments on LinkedIn? I would just have to thumbs up without even seeing evidence of it, just assuming that's because that's how human beings and social media works. I would have assumed if you had asked this question without any information that the platform would have been misandrist, that is sexist against men,
Hmm.
generally speaking. That's most of my experience in terms, especially in terms of regulated behavior on social media platforms. But I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. That's the Cambridge definition of sexist. How would you adjust that, or how would you go? I don't really know about that.
Yeah, well, it's probably the closest corollary in our many discussions is would be racist
Yeah.
because there's that distinction that I was making many episodes ago about interpersonal racism or systemic. And to me, especially if we're going to try to figure out if a platform is sexist or
Yeah.
any ist, that's a systemic exploration, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I appreciate that distinction. Like, you know, a person making sexist comments um, is probably easier to discern in a variety of ways. I might
Yeah.
extend it slightly in terms of the sort of oppressive quality of that.
Hmm.
That's potential in language, and that's harder, I think, to discern. Like what is really the outcome of language that seems to put somebody down or limit their opportunities or life, livelihood in some way. And so that maybe that's kind of the intersection here is that's the argument that's
Hmm.
being made, especially by women who are building their businesses and their livelihood on LinkedIn, is to say, this apparent lack of reach, this systemic sexism that's baked into the algorithm in some way is
Yeah.
actually limiting my livelihood. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. Is this? I would assume LinkedIn probably went through a very similar thing in 2020 as every other social media platform did, where the government was actively involved in censorship of social media platforms, and whatever it remains the greatest like intentional attempted violation of the First Amendment in known U.S. history. um, just tens of thousands of documented in court examples of this transpiring, and threats leveled for regulatory action, the whole thing. Kind of like what we saw with the Jimmy Kimmel thing times, I mean, we literally thousands. So I'm assuming at that same time there was similar algorithmic repression, but maybe there wasn't, because there was on uh, Twitter, there was on Instagram, there was on Facebook. There was no blue sky at the time, but it was very specifically, the algorithm was redesigned to specifically suppress people. For, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but for years people were like, shadow banning, that's not real. Come to find out, it is absolutely real. There are all sorts of mechanisms internally, and so I would have just assumed that it occurred on LinkedIn as well. So my wonder is like, is this essentially like, is this boundary testing? Oh, here's the latest way in which LinkedIn may or may not be starting to press people down. I've noticed an examination of it post Trump's most recent election that I think people have tried to seek out similar examples to what happened under Biden's administration of not just suppression in terms of like the chilling, in terms of like, what is it, boisterous speech against certain types of speech, but actual action. And I think a lot of people have kind of gone looking to be like, has essentially has have social media companies become more misogynist because our president is believed to be more misogynist, that sort of thing. So
Well,
again,
and that,
I wouldn't be surprised, but the timing is always interesting.
well, and that's what's fascinating about these algorithms. I thought you were going to go somewhere different with 2020, which was LinkedIn, like most social media, really jumped on the social justice bandwagon
Mm.
and added pronouns as a feature, like as an actual legit profile choice, which is a
Yeah.
really big deal because there just aren't that many fields. This is literally a form. You're on LinkedIn and you fill out a
Okay.
form,
Yeah.
and it's name, location, there's like a headline and then there's like a bio kind of thing, description. There just aren't all that many fields. So to add
Mm.
a whole new one is a pretty big deal. And as far as I can tell, when I'm looking at my profile and trying to change it, that's the only setting. The pronoun is the only setting that would indicate that where I'm telling LinkedIn my gender.
Yeah. Well, but this is fascinating too, because the accusation has been, even in the material you've shared, I love this because this ties back into previous conversations, then it makes gender equal sex. So if it's sexist and the only indication is pronoun, and now somehow pronoun is connected to gender, which is already a fascinating proposal in and of itself, it actually reified by adding a pronoun to the LinkedIn profile in the first place is to make things more potentially sexist by virtue of making all of a sudden someone's gender, meaning sex specifically, even if they didn't intend it that way, making someone's sex now much more central to their work. Whereas someone could have a cool little pen and ink drawing of themselves. And if they're sort of generic looking enough, then hopefully they're judged by the quality of their resume, the quality of their recommendations. You know, you almost could have on LinkedIn something similar to, if whoever wanted it and however they wanted it. It could be kind of like a blind audition scenario where
Well,
you can guess by name and that sort of thing. But also, I mean, if someone's name is Alex, it could mean Alexander, it could mean Alexandria. Like, and we don't need you don't need to know for employment purposes if we're trying, especially if we're just trying to keep. Again, I think the blind audition world is a great it's a great form and function that can't always be applied for all workplaces, obviously.
and
But
that has come in, right?
yeah,
There's enough evidence in HR that our biases show up when we see names from different cultures, et cetera.
yes, absolutely.
But here's the thing: the pronoun options are she, her,
Yeah,
so ladies first,
yeah.
he, him,
Uh-huh.
they, them, or custom,
Oh wow, fascinating.
which might appeal to you because I know you've said your pronoun is like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
MMA wrestler or something. I don't know.
Crastinator, procrastinator, and wrestler. Crastinator and wrestler are my favorite pronouns.
There you
Yes, I obviously heartily disagree, and I cannot believe any business site would take such a strong stance that individual people can control how other people refer to them uh, with biological based pronouns that have exist for But again, but since again, pronoun usage is the means by which people are determining whether something is sexist, is further continual overwhelming evidence that gender does equal sex, and it continues to equal that and always has equaled that. So then the thing is, all they did was they added something that basically went against most likely their intentions of adding it, because it doesn't function. Pronouns don't function except on a biological basis. Unless you live in the drag queen community or whatever. I know there's some sort of like inter-cohort differences there, where like if someone's in drag, then they're most often referred to as she, and they're out of drag, then they could be whatever. But a lot of times it's he.
And
People
it, and if
have that transformative language. But other than that, in a business setting, I think this would most firmly tell you, oh, cool, we need to hire a woman. We've got literally 17 dude coders. We need to like start. We need at least four women. One woman's actually going to be terrible, but we need to like and that's and that in and of itself is sexist because it's discriminatory on the basis of gender. But I also understand it in terms of trying to create a work atmosphere that is um, at the very least diverse in terms of male and female energy, whatever that brings. And all females bring their individual energy, all males bring their individual energy. But overall, like if you have a thing, if you have a sausage fest, or if you have a clam bake, I don't know what the other one's called, a clam party. Like it can be, it's just specific. That's all it is. It's not good or bad. It's just particular. And there can be great advantages of having a blended group.
Yeah, no, and I've certainly noticed that bias in myself hiring, and it's
Yeah.
very real. And I think, especially as you know, spending a lot of time in the DEI space, I mean, I think DEI at its best works against that and actually tries to neutralize bias,
Yeah.
and yet it there's a cognitive dissonance there because it also favors diversity, right? So it's like,
Sure.
okay,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. Exactly.
how do you design for diversity without having bias? That's pretty
Yeah.
challenging.
It's pretty
Um,
tricky.
and I thought this would be interesting coming out of our last rigorous discussion around trans identity.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants to know more about that, go check out our last three-part series.
Reports. Well, oh, and you had sent me the thing. So people had changed their gender and posted the same material. I didn't know about the other experiment. You can tell me more about that. But that's one you had sent me, and that to me was doesn't at all like if a person just changed their pronouns and then posted a thing and then changed their pronoun to another thing and posted a thing, that is not a male or female prioritization. That is a trans prioritization, because nobody changes their pronouns except for people claiming to be transgender.
Right. You'd think
So
the
this
algorithm
is,
would be aware of it's not just like starting from scratch, like, oh,
yeah, it's just like, oh,
they're male
yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah. No,
It's
so that
actually
would,
noticing the change. Yeah, the
yeah,
frequency
so
of the change. Yeah.
yeah, so that would be literally amplifying marginalized voices, which is a literally like a tent pole ethos. It's on posters, it's on T-shirts, it's on bumper stickers. Um, So in that way, I was like, oh, that would be the most rational Occam's razor bias there. But if they gave material to other people, I don't know. I find algorithms very, very difficult to ascertain what in the heck they're doing. And that's
Oh
why I
yeah.
say a lot of people are like experientially, um, when I post about this subject, my reach tends to go here. This happened on Instagram for years, the past 5 years. When I post about this subject, my reach happens to go here. Maybe it relates, maybe it doesn't. It really wasn't until we saw stuff in court documents where people were saying it out loud, or whatever, Zuckerberg went on Rogan and just said the stuff they did. Then you were like, okay, it was happening. Other than that, I think with all these experiments, it's very difficult to determine the why of things.
Yeah.
Meaning,
Right. So
if LinkedIn wasn't sexist, couldn't these, like, just wasn't, couldn't these same things occur?
right. So yes, so that's one of the I think challenges and realities. If social media is truly social, it is a reflection.
Yeah.
It's the platforms, they built a lot of features, a lot of things over the years. And obviously the algorithms are designed to keep our attention because that's how they monetize.
Yeah.
Um, and they're still based on the content people put into them for the most part, mixed in
Sure.
with ads and some stuff. And so then their job is to sort of figure out, oh, what kind of content should I serve up to this person at this given time? And it's like very complex because it's obviously they they're monetizing for attention. So like, oh, this person tends to click on this kind of content and tends to spend this much time reading it, et cetera.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, it's funny. Like one of the things that annoys me the most. I mean, I've never thought of LinkedIn as terribly innovative to begin with, just as a platform,
Sure.
because they've
Yeah.
usually just kind of borrowed what Facebook has done over
Yeah.
the years, and not a there haven't been a lot of substantive changes like in the design for a long time. We basically Facebook has had the news feed. We basically still live in a news feed world, and that's annoying to me because it's very attention getting. You can't open the platform without
Yeah.
something jumping out at you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember Dave Chappelle did like, what if the internet was a real place in one of his sketches, and it was like
Yes.
these ads jumping out. You're like, ah.
Ah!
Uh,
Yeah.
um, but we could look at these layers, right? Because the pronoun would be the most discrete layer
Mm.
of signal, say,
Hmm.
right? Like male, female.
Yeah.
And there's other options, but let's just say in this because this is about sexist, so
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
about male, female. So then the next layer would be your resume, essentially. That's
Yeah.
like I thought it was. It is still that. It is really like, and some people just flat out use it as a resume and a job board. And in that, you're going to have things about your career
Mm.
and gaps in your career. And
Mm.
so I was listening to one story about this, and that's what one representative was saying. It was like called it like a proxy algorithm bias. So it
Oh.
would be actually fairly shocking to me if some coder somewhere literally was like, oh, let's design the algorithm where people who choose, male, he, him pronouns get 200%, reach. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
A,
Yeah.
it's just like so blatant and weird and kind of yucky, but also just it'd be too easy to find, if they get audited or whatever. Like
Yes. Oh, for sure.
just the CYA aspect of it.
Yes.
So this career one though is a little different though, because all of a sudden now we're stepping into the much murkier ground of, well, how do you analyze somebody's career?
Yeah.
Women, as far as I know, tend to have more gaps due to child, birth, and there's a lot of talk that they get punished for that in a lot of aspects of their career, and having those gaps, and they don't get the promotion, they have to kind of start over and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, the nature of the work, maybe. I don't know. I haven't done the deep research, but maybe the types of jobs they have, if it's like teacher or social worker or whatever. I don't know if that's true. I know a lot of male teachers and social workers and whatnot. So
Yeah.
there's, I think, some question about like, well, what is the career like tell LinkedIn in general about the content
Hmm.
you're and titles, right? And then the
Yeah.
language itself, like what are you posting? And so
Yes.
there's an article in The Guardian about this, and it refers to a woman, Megan Cornish, a communication strategist for mental health tech companies. I think I want to meet her.
Hmm.
Uh, saying, and this is so fascinating because I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but this literally says first she changed her gender to male.
Mm.
I'm like, I don't see that option. I literally don't see that option. I see
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pronouns, so I assume that's what they mean.
Yeah.
Then she told ChatGPT to rewrite her profile in male-coded language based on a LinkedIn post suggesting the platform favors agentic words such as strategic and leader. Finally, she asked ChatGPT to rewrite old, badly performing posts from several months ago in that similar agentic language, figuring that recycling old, reworked content would help her isolate what effect bro coding was having on her reach. So now we have a new term, bro coding.
Yeah. Well, isn't that assumption of agentic language as being male? Isn't that in and of itself a sexist assumption? I don't know why. Listen, and I'm not saying that's incorrect and sexist. I don't view sexist as necessarily a negative thing myself. I use it as more of an analytical tool, meaning is this focused on someone's sex? So yeah, again, this is just not. It's a very listen. I'm not saying they should have done a better experiment because the better experiment is to literally start a brand new profile, fill it with the same information, do it for the same number of years, interact with the exact same number of people. I mean, controlling all the confounders is phenomenally difficult. But if you just change your pronouns and then you rewrite everything to sound more bro-ish, then all you just did was came out as trans, and so all you've done is prove a trans bias, meaning it's biased against, I guess, what would offensively be referred to as cis.
So the
Anti-cis
switching,
bias.
maybe not a great test. Maybe the better test is the
It's
one
a
I
tip.
mentioned earlier, where it's,
Yeah,
hey, I'm two people, hopefully with pretty similar, profiles, followers, reach,
yeah.
etc.,
But it would
which is
depend on
actually going to
yeah.
be hard to find, frankly. Post exactly the same content at exactly the same moment. Let's measure. Yeah.
Let's measure but that also algorithmically, again, I don't design algorithms, I'm just assuming. So if it depends on how that content flows based on the other types of content those people put up, meaning I'm assuming every algorithm, just like when they were siphoning off viewers or followers and stuff on other social media platforms, there are certain types of content from certain types of people that get certain types of promotion. And when they change and let's say they promote their second or third tier level of popularity content, then their reach may also be limited in that fashion. Because again, like you said, the intention is to optimize every single user's time spent on platform. So simply just being like F off women is a terrible design idea.
Yeah.
It's just it's counterproductive financially, right? So
Yeah.
I
Good
often just
point.
look like, what's the capitalist motive? The capitalist motive is keep everybody there as long as possible. Now, if you can piss people off, you can keep people on your platform for a long, long time. So again, there's a Machiavellian, ooh, what if we do this manipulation occasionally just to get people excited? And then people spent 3 hours reading all these reports of how sexist we are. Hey, they were still on site. They still saw our ads. We still made a ton of money off of that. So yes, that could happen theoretically. I assume just basic site maintenance and um, troubleshooting occupies most people's day. But again, I don't work at LinkedIn. So, but yeah, I think the hard thing for me is just like, what is the motivation? Why would they do it? Like with the censorship in 2020, like it had a clear cause or at least a clear reason as to why. They said it was sort of a public health concern, tamping down on misinformation. There is no such thing in the ether of tamping down women's voices. People suggest there is, that we have like a phenomenally misogynist administration or something. We really don't. Like there are women hired in all sorts of elevated positions. There are women and gay men hired to higher positions than have ever been hired in other administrations. So we just don't have evidence for there to be like you can see this is part of a overall chilling. The only thing I would note is in the scientific realm. I think I sent you this study not long ago, that they found that discrimination in the sciences, at least towards hiring, is distinctly anti-man at the moment, or at least it has been for the past half a decade or so. That women are more likely to be in the sciences hired initially, and I think even tenure tracked. So if it is an attempt to ameliorate that, maybe theoretically, but I feel like I'm grasping at straws just to try to make this so. Because again, again, not having coded, I don't understand how the algorithm could be adapted in that way. So then maybe this thing is saying, is the culture of LinkedIn's users sexist? Meaning they prefer at this moment in time and this is not even male. Is it agentic? Does it have an agentic bias? And I would have no problem putting a thumbs up as that probably is the case. We are in a present moment, as we've talked about in so many different ways, where people are freaking out constantly about all sorts of different things. People, you talk to the average whoever, people feel like we're in a strangely, especially anybody who's online or on social media, we're in a strangely unstable period, and it's been lasting for about eight to 10 years. So, anyone speaking clearly, agentic leadership, active language, like I think one of the problems with our culture is we do lack like proficient, um, morally upright masculine leadership in the agentic sense, and we can also have agentic feminine language as well. But we want strong visions. Which way do we go? Everything's confusing. Everything is scary. So that to me would just be that's a potential cultural bias towards fix me, fix me, tell me what to do. I mean, if you look at the nonfiction list on the New York Times bestseller list, there's a lot of stuff of how to, and there always has been, but I feel like even more so. There's like how to identify the calamity and how to fix the world and how to fix your life. So people don't want to necessarily sit in it and over analyze it or whatever, outside of like progressive spaces or hyper intellectual spaces or that sort of thing where your mindfulness spaces. A lot of people are just like, tell me which way to go and I will go there. Just please, someone boss me around.
Yeah, it's alluring. I mean, cynically, the only thing we know for sure is that many of the apparent women writing these posts went viral during this period. And I
Yes.
actually haven't been on LinkedIn as much in the new year, and so I have not seen anything recently. This Guardian article has, I don't know that they put the date, but it has a huge yellow banner at the top that says this article is more than 1 month old, which must mean it's ancient in
Whoa,
modern
that's
terms.
wild.
Isn't that funny? Uh,
Ancient history, y'all.
it's like, whoa, warning! This is really old news. Um, and I'm thinking like a lot of my content did really well on LinkedIn this year, and I did my best to sort of base it on what I know about timing and sort of best practices and stuff. I mean, I used to
Yeah,
teach that
yeah,
stuff, and some of them totally bombed out. I don't know, and it's hard to tell based on the content alone.
yeah. I think so too.
I I think all my content is a lot of it's sort of coverage. Like I went to a conference, and
Oh, okay.
so I don't know, like the nature of these conferences. Many of them are more like spiritual, which I would think is more, I don't know, femme content, I guess, in that way. But um, I don't know. That's it's like a weird thing to say as that comes out of my mouth. It's like there's so many male spiritual leaders, but it's not
Yeah,
agentic. It's more of the mindful presence being state. Maybe if that's the just I like this distinction between like being and doing. If that's how we're
yes,
kind of thinking LinkedIn might code,
yeah,
female and male. Um,
yeah. Or I honestly, I think the audience might. Um, Yeah, so I like the yeah doing or being. I would assume right now the audience is very into doing. Maybe at the
yeah.
beginning of the year, being gets prioritized again. But I got to tell you, by February, by Valentine's Day, it's what are you doing?
It's also a professional network. Like to your point, to
Yes.
go back to the
Yep.
origins of this, and like, yeah, I'm lucky to work in professions that have a lot of being in them.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the end of the day, we're talking about work in a capitalist society.
Yes.
That's a lot of doing, and a lot of people are there looking for jobs and networking, and it is the very much the doing part of life, and that's supposedly
Yes.
what LinkedIn had carved out in the grand, you know, in the hills of the social media,
Yeah, and
bounds.
maybe and I could see that as an algorithmic reprioritization, especially in the what are they? I don't know who Newsweek or someone was like, are we now in that we were in the great awakening, and now we're in the great dewokening, or what? You know what I mean? I think there's ebbs and flows culturally where there was a lot of like, let's deconstruct culture itself. And I feel like we're sort of past that largely, and we're kind of actually moving into like, okay, like what did we learn from that? How did we go overboard? How did we go underboard? Like what did it, but also we got to make some progress. And this is the crazy thing where I actually think presidents do have some, I always think presidents are pretty meaningless. Um, but they do matter in that we have a much more agentic president overtly, meaning he's like the stuff that our president currently does, the leader of our nation does, is like, I'm saying I'm going to do this. And then he does this big old thing. So we do have an energy of like, let's do stuff. Let's get stuff done. And honestly, I think some of the most problematic things about him are how he does things. And it's like, wait a second, shouldn't you have talked to the board about this first? Or you know what I mean? Like it's that
Yeah,
like it was like you just took out the president of Venezuela, and Venezuelans seemed really excited. And again, he was like, as far as everyone says, he was like illegally put into office. It sounds like a good thing to like do, but it sounds like did you kind of think through the like aftermath of doing the
right.
good thing? Like, you know what I mean? There's that sort of lack of caution element.
Yeah,
Whereas the previous president did a ton, but really wasn't covered and didn't talk about it as much. Meaning, like under Biden, we had the greatest number of constitutional violations in U.S. history, outstripping even Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War, only by like an amendment or two, but still. But it wasn't talked. It wasn't like blustery, boisterous talking about it, agentic, and there wasn't those big moves happening where it's like we're bringing peace, we're ending this war in the middle, like whatever Israel is no longer bombing the crap out of Gaza, or like we're just taking this president out, or it sounds like now, I don't know, we might start fighting Iran because they're killing their citizens by the thousands every week right now. It's a very like it's so funny because it was meant like the whole libertarian thing was meant to be non-interventionist. I just speak of all that political stuff because like that is what's in the ether. Meaning, does that shape the audience over time to be like, oh, now's the time to do, even if it's spastic, even if it's the wrong thing. Sometimes, like, let's be doing. I feel like we spent so long just being so afraid to do, and from 2020 to 22, people are afraid to do anything. So then you're like, it's go, go, go time. In which case, specifically because they said agentic language, that's what my brain is hooking on. That people
Yeah.
are like, no, it's go time now. Let's get it done. It's get her done time.
No, and that's fascinating. I mean, this I won't go into this tangent with limited time, but apparently Israel still is bombing Gaza. So it's even the and many are talking about Trump getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and it's
Yep.
sort of like how does the nature of that prize reflect these times when like what is being rewarded? Like just yeah,
Yep.
like just taking out a leader without thinking of what's going to happen next, etc.
Yeah.
So one other thought that comes up is in addition to like the being and doing
Yeah.
women generally, I think actually for some reasonable biological reasons are more associated with family and vulnerability in children.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And uh, I'm wondering if that plays into this. So that and that also
Mm.
takes us into a brief discussion about like what is the content on LinkedIn? And
Yeah.
I would say back in the day it was primarily professional.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm somebody in conscious capitalism, et cetera, who has championed like bringing our full selves to work, and
Yes.
we don't.
Yes.
We're human. We're fully human. We don't. The door doesn't
Yeah.
shut, and it's like, well, leave that part. Now some businesses are designed that way and want to work that way.
Severance. Yeah.
Uh, so I'm that could be another sort of categorization or correlation of
Yeah.
like what content is female. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think you have seen more. You've seen more political content on LinkedIn. You've seen more
Yeah.
vulnerable content, more personal stuff. I mean all of it. It's a huge social network. You're going to have it all there.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's funny. You've exposed me to it in the past 3 or 4 years. I was like, this seems insane to me. Like as it is, my wife lives in constant concern that we're never going to get hired again because of the things I post on other social media sites. But people are just like planting intense, very extreme flags in all sorts of areas on LinkedIn. And I was like, isn't this like, again, I think of work a little bit more as like the liberal paradise where everyone can have wildly disparate views about so many different things because your job is to just be the person who does the thing that you guys are all doing. You can disagree on everything else except of how to make these styrofoam cups or whatever the heck your business is. You know what I mean? Just you probably shouldn't be making styrofoam cups, but you know what I mean. You're just making these things, right? You're just making the widget. Everything else, honestly, you can talk about it during the lunchroom if you want to. Maybe talking about the barbecue, but in general, you're like, oh my gosh, do you hear what's his face going off about politics? Like it's generally not so in some ways it's like bring your whole self, but it's bringing a pretty radical self. And I was like, I was reading so many of the things you were posting and people were responding and yes anding and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, these people, in some ways I thought it was cool. I was like, these people have no fear. Like they are, or they're trying to intensely appeal to a very particular niche that they feel like dominates the sociocultural ethos of where they're trying to get a job. That could be there. Or they're also just fully willing to like alienate their like potential employers who don't think that way. Meaning like, why are you on a job site like that? If that part of it seemed crazy to me, like on a job site that you're like posting all these pretty radical opinions about social order. I would be like, I don't know if that's I just didn't and so I've posted plenty of things that people hate and I've gotten blocked about or whatever, but I don't think I would ever even think of doing it on LinkedIn because I was just like, no, 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 that's just like work. That's
Yeah.
work. If you want to know my opinion on anything, or if you want to know my conclusions on things as well, we can totally talk about that. But that's not work. I wouldn't bring that to work unless I wait for someone else to bring it up. You know?
Yeah, and as we discussed a few months ago, I was accused of being anti-Semitic right on LinkedIn. So,
Yeah,
all hats are off.
it's
So,
dangerous, man.
so the last thing I'll bring up is back on
Yep.
the more the interpersonal side. And
Yeah.
this is apparently in 2023, a survey found that 90% of women receive unwanted romantic or sexual messages,
Hmm.
uh, highlighting a cultural issue alongside the technical. the potential
Yeah.
technical bias.
Oh, yeah, I can understand that. Well, the question is, did they ask men and did men receive the same number of messages or less? And were they wanted? That's the question. Meaning unwanted, if it's the first message, I don't know whether someone's want even really relevantly applies. Um, so if you just get, and then if you're responding and then you're saying, don't send me more, and then they send me more, that would be a legitimate not want. But if
Hmm.
someone's just sending you a romantic message, and you're like, I didn't want that. You're like, well, I didn't want you to post political stuff out loud for everyone to see. So who cares? Like, who cares what people want? I also think dudes, we also notice about women and dating that they are far more discriminating on dating sites, right? They like say no to like 80% and men say no to like 40% or something like that. So
Right.
in general, I was like, a little bit, that's a little bit tough luck because that is just the dating strategies of the two different members of our dimorphic species.
Well,
And
again, that just
how
seems to be a reflection of how
people are.
we are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Every woman I talk to says she gets,
yeah,
more
and
attention than.
yeah, and this is sexist, but are dudes gross? I mean, I put a small thumbs up. I mean, dudes are pretty gross sometimes.
But maybe that's our next topic. Well, let's
Yeah,
let's let's go ahead and revote.
yeah.
Is LinkedIn sexist?
I guess it would just what limited I know. I'm going to move from a neutral to a thumbs down. I I I I would say no, pending further review.
And I'm going to stick with a yes. Again, mostly focused on what I perceive to be just an innate systemic bias, just because all algorithms have bias, and
For
this
sure.
one, but it's wavering. It's maybe wavering to a sideways, just because I don't see, like, we haven't seen the evidence yet. We've seen a few anecdotal experiments,
Yeah, yeah,
some flare-ups.
yeah. And I just like say, I hope it isn't.
I hope it isn't, or if it is, I hope they correct it. There
They
you go.
fix that. Course correct. Yeah, it's a new year, guys. You can do it.
All right.
All
We
right,
did
man.
it.
We did it.
All right.
All
Love
right.
you.
Love
Bye.
you.